Papa's here. Papa's here.
What you come back for?
You throwing a big event tonight?
Your money come with blood.
All money come with blood, baby. Listen here. This ain't no house party.
Y'all ready to drink? Y'all ready to sweat till y'all stink?
You want some?
You keep dancing with the devil. One day he's gonna follow you home.
Like I hear the crickets do.
Still hurts coming back.
Why you here, smoke? Smoke. Why you here?
Our daddy was an evil man. And he passed that evil down to us.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, Jim Crow vampires. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. And if you don't know who or what Jim Crow is, just stick around and you'll get your history lesson here in a little bit. How the hell you doing, Mike? I'm doing pretty well.
I'm doing pretty good. Back from a little mini vacation, so getting back into the normal routine. Luckily, I was able to get away for a couple hours to see this movie during the vacation, so it didn't really interrupt our normal recording schedule, so that's good. Also, with us, it's Don and Ellie. What's up, Don?
Hey, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
All right, so this week we are talking what turns out to be pretty successful movie. I think it was number one in the box office this week. That would be Sinners, currently sitting at an 8.2 on IMDb. Wow, that's the 8.0 barrier is tough to break. Now, I know this is still a new movie, so like there is a chance that the longer, the more time that goes by, it'll get like the normal kind of pushback, and it might drop into the high sevens, but still 8.2 is a barrier. So yeah, we're talking Sinners. So the synopsis: trying to leave their troubled lives behind, twin brothers return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. All right. We're going to kick it off with general thoughts on Sinners. Venom, what did you think of the movie?
This movie is a fucking masterpiece. 10 out of 10 no notes. I can't get over how amazing this goddamn movie is. Every performance, every musical set piece, every horror set piece, everything that this movie does, the score, not just the songs that the actors are performing in the movie, but the actual score. Like there's an actual like heavy metal riff that plays through this movie that takes place sometime in the 1940s. And every time it plays, it fucking hits me right in my chest. I absolutely loved it. Now, I did see this movie twice this weekend, once in IMAX and once in Dolby, and I gotta say that because of the music and just the sound design in this movie, the Dolby experience was just so much more fulfilling, at least for me. Obviously, I am a sound engineer by degree. I am a former musician. So yeah, this movie works for me in every way possible. This is now the second movie of 2025 that makes me very happy that I don't watch trailers. The first one was Companion. If you guys remember, since I don't watch trailers, I had no idea that movie was about, an AI bot. So when we get that reveal in the movie, it was a complete shock to me. Well, guess what? Again, I did not watch a trailer for this movie in any way, shape, or form. I didn't read anything about it. And when our antagonists rear their ugly heads, it was a complete shock to me. I absolutely loved it. I honestly thought we were going towards a more supernatural thriller, especially after the first like half hour to 40 minutes where there's no real horror in the film. So I'm thinking that this is turning into a slow burn supernatural horror. But then when the antagonists make themselves known and the shit hits the fan, it turns into that fun Siege style movie, that a lot of vampire fans are looking for. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people that don't like this movie for many, many reasons. I've already spoken to a few podcasters who don't like this movie, believe it or not, talking about the fact that, there's too many, that it's basically a horror musical. There's literally 4 or 5 whole musical sequences in this movie, not just, quick blurps, but like whole songs that are performed with dance sequences and everything. One of them in particular is probably my favorite filmed scene in a movie, not just a horror film, but in a movie probably in the last 10 years. There is a musical performance in this that absolutely blew my fucking brains out of my head. I loved it so much. I just, we talked about during our review of Opus, we talked about how much I adore horror films that utilize music, movies like Trick or Treat, Lords of Salem, The Perfection. And I lamented how Opus didn't really deliver on that. With Opus, the music had very little to do with any of the horror involved in the film. But in this one, it has almost everything to do with it. And I just love that about it. Let's talk about performances. Amazing performance by Michael B. Jordan as twins. Potentially the best twin performance I've ever seen by a single actor or actress. The reason that I say this is because usually when one actor plays a set of twins, the twins are drastically different. It's almost like the actor's trying to show their range. Think about Karen Black in the second segment of the original Trilogy of Terror movie. Think about Tom Hardy in Legend. Think about John Lithgow in Raising Cain. The twins are very drastically different. This performance here by Michael B. Jordan feels like the most organic, believable performance by twins. Like, you can definitely tell that they have some personality traits, but they are still twins. They are obviously very in tune with each other's thinking, the things that they're going to do. It's like I said, it's potentially the best dual performance by a single actor ever set to film. Our main protagonist, Sammy, played by Miles Catan. Holy shit, my friends. Let me say this loud for the people in the back. This is Miles' first acting credit. Let me repeat that. This is Miles Canton's first acting credit, and he's fucking brilliant as young Sammy throughout this film. Now, as it turns out, I did a little bit of research because I didn't know who Miles Caton was, or however you pronounce it, Caton, Caton. This guy is actually a blues musician. He's actually a real life musician, which of course makes sense because as soon as Sammy opens his mouth the first time, that voice that comes out of that little 20-year-old body just does not fit. Like, this kid, and I'm not even necessarily talking about Sammy, the character in the movie. I'm talking about the actor. His voice has the soul of like a 60-year-old blues man. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like a 20-year-old kid. And I'm saying 20 because the actor actually is 20. Miles is 20 years old. So a 20-year-old with that kind of soul coming out of his voice is fucking unheard of. It's just a perfectly cast, especially when you think about the monologue at the beginning and how they talk about how there are certain musicians every generation that come around that are so in tune with their music and the universe that they can conjure spirits from the past and the future. Miles was the perfect casting for this. His voice, I'm not sure if he's actually playing the guitar in this. I'm going to assume he is, but I know for a fact he is actually singing. So just stellar, stellar, stellar. The rest of the cast too. Annie, she is a veteran of the Loki TV series. She was also, oh, what's the actress's name? God damn it, I'm so sorry. Where are we here? Annie. Wumi. Oh God, it's a very African name. Wumi Masuko, or excuse me, Musaku. Something like that. Anyway, if you watched Lovecraft Country, she played Ruby in that movie. She was the one who could change from black to white. It sounds weird, but if you saw Lovecraft Country, then you know what I'm talking about. And like I said, she's also the main enforcer at the TVA in the Loki movies. She was also recently in Deadpool and Wolverine as that same character, the new enforcer for the TVA. So whenever I see her, I've been in love with her since Lovecraft Country. Everything she does, I'm so happy to watch. Delroy Lindo, fucking Delroy Lindo as the amazing Delta Slim, a blues musician who's obviously long in the tooth, definitely towards the end of his career, but he's the guy that has all that experience. Like I said, I was saying that Sammy sings like he's lived 60, 70 years. Well, Delroy's character, Delta Slim, actually is that character. He's seen some shit. He even tells a couple of stories in the movie about the shit that he's seen and how it affects him and their people in general. Don't forget, this movie is taking place sometime in the 40s. They never actually give us the exact date in this film, but what I was able to figure out through a little bit of investigative work is that in the movie, Stack mentions that him and his brother were in the trenches in Germany, which of course would imply World War II. Allied forces didn't invade Germany until March 22nd, 1945, less than 2 months after Germany would surrender to the Allied forces, which means that Smoke and Stack were there at that time. But then in the film, they also mention, one character mentions that he thought they were in Chicago working for Al Capone. Well, my friends, Al Capone died in 1947. So by my reasoning, I'm thinking that it's 1946 or very early 1947. It could even be later 1947 because obviously no internet. So maybe the news of Capone's death wouldn't make it all the way down to the Mississippi Delta in 1947 all that quickly. It might take like weeks or months before that news actually got down there. So like I said, I'm placing the movie at like 1946, 1947. And of course, World War II ended September 2nd, 1945, which means, the twins would have come home around that time. They would have gone back to Chicago, continued working for whoever it is they were working for before coming back down to the Mississippi Delta. So you guys tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong. Like I said, that's what I was able to come up with using little lines spoken in the movie. Okay. Let's talk about the music. Holy shit, the musical set pieces here, and I'm talking about every single one of them. There is even a hokey musical set piece in here where our first three antagonists arrive at the juke joint that the twin brothers open, and they do like an antebellum style, like slave era song, and that song is even really, really well done. Like one of the characters in the movie, one of the black guys even said, hey, that ain't half bad. Like, it's pretty good. So yeah, just these musical set pieces. I mean, let's talk about the very first one in the club. And I know this is general thoughts. I know that we're going to have a lot more to talk about as we move along, but that first set piece where they actually utilize spirits from the past and the future. I'm sorry, but that is potentially one of the best musical set pieces I've ever seen in a fucking movie. Bar none. I always kind of lean towards the dance sequence and climax, if you remember that, as being one of the most well done like music and dance sequences I had ever seen in a genre film. Well, this one trumps it by a mile. When we start seeing like images of African dancers and tribal people drumming, and then we see like, psychedelic like 70s what's it called? Like Bootsy Collins and George Clinton style with a flying V guitar, but they're in a juke joint in the 1940s. You see B-boys breakdancing. Both times that I saw this movie, my mouth was agape during this scene. I could not get over how well it was shot, how well the sound design works, because there's multiple pieces of music playing throughout certain parts of that set piece, and it's just so masterfully done. We get a traditional Irish jig later done by all of the antagonists once there's a larger number of the antagonists. That is also just a beautifully shot set piece. The girl Perline, her song that she plays in the juke joint is amazing. Like I'm telling you, everything about this movie works for me. And let me try to speed this up so I can give my co-host a chance to speak, because my friends, I love this movie so much I could talk about it by myself for 2 hours easily, but obviously that's not fair. So the last thing I'm going to bring up is the director, Ryan Coogler. Ryan Coogler, his track record is impeccable. The man has only made 5 movies, and 4 of them have been nominated for Oscars. Creed, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Fruitvale Station, all nominated for, different Oscars, be they Best Picture, Best Screenplay, whatever the case may be. And I'm making a prediction right now, Sinners will be another Oscar nomination for Ryan Coogler. I don't know that it'll necessarily be a Best Director nomination. It might be a screenplay nomination, something along those lines. It might be an acting nomination for Michael B. Jordan or Miles Catton. But yeah, Ryan Coogler, this guy knows how to make a movie. He knows how to engross you, how to pull you into the movie. Now, earlier I mentioned that a lot of people aren't going to like this movie, and I recognize that. It's a very slow burn for the first hour. There's one horror set piece in the first hour of a 2.5 hour long movie. So that sounds like a very slow burn, but like I said, I was riveted every single second of this film. I was not bored at any point. I cared about all these characters. I wanted to see make it through this night of horror that they all had to deal with. This movie gave me everything. Maybe just a little short on the gore, because I know movies like From Dusk Till Dawn and 30 Days a Night are a little bit more gory and, way more visceral. But that's not the intention with this movie. This movie is not meant to be a gore fest. This movie is a thinker. It is a cerebral film. It's part historical drama and part vampire horror. And it does both of them impeccably, absolutely masterful. So yeah, this is my number 1 film of 2025 by a fucking mile. In my opinion, it blows The Monkey away. As much as I love The Monkey and still do, I literally just watched it last Tuesday. This movie, it's so just masterfully made, masterfully shot, performed, acted, edited, just everything. I literally have not one complaint about it. I know some people are going to bitch about the Lord of the Rings style ending because the movie technically has 3 endings, and I loved every goddamn one of them. I don't even care. Like, going in to see it the second time, I was concerned that maybe the triple ending would rub me the wrong way. Nope, I liked it even more on second watch. So I'm going to go ahead and shut up just to give my co-host a chance to talk. But I'm just going to say, as a former musician, as a minority, and as a lifelong horror fan, this movie is a goddamn masterpiece. 10 out of 10. It literally could not be any fucking better. I'm done. Who's next?
That would be John and Ellie. What are your thoughts on the movie?
Well, I'm nowhere near there, but I'm camping out at a pretty reasonable elevation on this. Yeah, I'll say this. I do have issues with the length. I definitely felt it in the first hour. Definitely takes a while to get going. Not nearly horror enough for me. I understand that that's kind of where the plot line goes, but yeah, I would have wanted maybe one or two additional set pieces, maybe just to, maybe amp up the thread, maybe make something a little bit more obvious. Some of the storylines that kind of get, explained away in the second act, maybe, give them a little bit of extra juice and, intensity or urgency or what have you, just to, kind of speed things along. I don't mind the music. It's not for me. It's not really my kind of style. That said, I did enjoy some of the performances. Maybe knock one of them off. What was that one? I'll probably remember when we get to the walkthrough, but there was one that kind of felt a little, superfluous and didn't really need to be there. But yeah, not necessarily my kind of taste, my kind of music, but it wasn't, excruciatingly awful. So I'm not going to say too much more about it. But for me, the main thing is that it felt far more like a cinematic showcase rather than a genre set piece, where it seemed much more, artistic and arty, and I'm not really about that. I could care less how good your technicians are. I could care less how good your acting prowess is. I want to see the story take place, and yeah, that's kind of where my main thing is. Yeah, I do enjoy it, and I can, appreciate and understand what went on behind the scenes. Some of the shots and some of the imagery here, they look great, admittedly, but the thing is, I'm not interested in that when I watch my films. That's kind of where I fall flat with this, is that it seemed more artistic, and I'm just not an artistic person. I mean, hell, I'll watch a, $500 indie film. I mean, it means nothing to me. So selling it on that kind of prowess and that kind of over the top theatricality and showmanship, it's fun to look at, but that's just not why I'm going to a movie. And yeah, that kind of just, it doesn't rub me the wrong way. It's just, I use the term, you're barking up the wrong tree with that kind of stuff. And that's just kind of where I come off with this, is that it's just material that's barking up the wrong tree. Now, once this gets going, once we finally start getting something happening, once we finally start getting the supernatural action happening, yeah, I'm on board. I really enjoy it. I really do. And, I like the two main characters. I probably would prefer Smoke just a little bit more, because I thought he was a little bit more, maybe it's my whiteness coming up, but he would be the kind of guy that I would have hung out with a little easier than Stax. But yeah, overall, I still really enjoy the two of them. They're still really fun. I love the final half hour. That I could watch all the day long. That was just fantastic. I loved all those set pieces. It was just incredible. But yeah, just for me, it just seemed more like it was not the kind of stuff that I really gravitate to and I really focus on in my films. And it's great to look at. It's it's easily one of the most eye-catching and, maybe the most cinematically engaging films that, I've at least seen, probably in the last, decade or so. But it's just not the kind of stuff that I look for. I don't really care about how good your acting is. I don't really care how good your, set designer or DP or cinematographer is. I want to see the action unfold, and, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it helps. It makes it, a little bit easier to digest and makes it a little bit more, look professional and palatable and stuff like that. But it's not a shining grace, and that's just really where I came off with it. I definitely see where Venom's coming from. I would easily see myself being like that if I, was more of a cinephile than, more of a genre fan. But yeah, I'm more genre fan than cinephile. So I can't say that this is one that I really hated, but it's just one that I don't feel like it was made for me. And as good as it is, as you know, it'll definitely be on my list at the end of the year. And I'm still, you know, I still at that stage in the film where it's probably going to make my top 10. It'll probably end up making my back half more than my top half. But yeah, if you're somebody that prefers that kind of stuff more than me, I can see you enjoying it more than I did. But I'm still somebody that I don't really care about all that. I want to see the other stuff happening. I want to see, you know, the action unfold, and that's just more where my personal preference taste relates. So yeah, it tends to fall more into that realm than anything else for me. So I'd still say give it a watch. I mean, it's definitely something worth exploring. You know, maybe you're going to come off with it within, you know, different tastes than I am, but either way, it's still definitely enjoyable. Definitely has a lot to like about it. And yeah, it's still one that I'm really going to harp on for a while. Maybe not necessarily so much to Venom's degree, just because, again, like I said, a lot of its positives are just areas I'm not a huge fan of and I really gravitate to. But either way, most of the stuff that I have about it is just personal preference. So yeah, I mean, Venom already said a lot. I don't really have much else to add. So I guess back to you, Mike.
Okay. So for me, easily number one of the year so far. It's no contest. Nothing is even close to this. Nothing even touches it so far. Never bored. Never felt the runtime. I thought the world building, the character development was to such a high degree that when we started getting the carnage and character deaths, they actually meant something. You actually felt the impact. It wasn't just like fodder for the sake. Now there were enough people at the kind of like final set piece that yeah, you can call some the masses like throwaway deaths just to like add to the high volume, but some of the more well-known and established characters that go, the impacts felt real because most of the people that were getting picked off had real importance to the story and what was going on, and I think that's attributed to the writing. I know some people would call this a slow burn before the horror kicks in, but I never felt it was slow paced at all because the entire time, to me, you're getting some type of development. You're learning about the characters, you're getting the story set up, you're understanding why they're doing what they're doing. To me, that didn't feel slow. And then once the vampire stuff kicks in, it's there's not much more to be said that Venom hadn't already said. I mean, if anyone's seen the trailer, you can cut. Like I already had the From Dusk Till Dawn vibe about this just based off the trailer alone, and it definitely has similarities, but it stands on its own. Like it's a completely different crafted story. I love the time period. I loved the artistic nature. I love the musical set pieces, and sometimes that stuff can like take you out of the moment if it's done sloppy or if it feels like it's just thrown in for no reason. But I thought it was just excellent in this movie, and like Venom said so much, I don't know what else to add. I just thought this was excellent. It was a super fun time at the theater. This is like one of the reasons I enjoy going to theater, to see big, loud movies like this that just aren't going to come off the same in your living room. This one, I was kind of surprised about IMAX beforehand. Once I saw the movie, I understood, and now I'm kind of like I maybe should try to go to like an IMAX screen to see it because it is big, loud, and aggressive. Yeah, it's an aggressive movie in every way, and that's part of the fun about it. And I just felt that like everything in this movie, everything that happens in this movie feels impactful. Like nothing feels wasted, nothing feels like throwaway. Everything that leads up to like our third act is why to me the third act works so well, is because the track has been set so carefully and so efficiently that like there's really no characters you want to see like die. You want everyone to make it out, and that's not always the case in horror movies. Even good horror movies, sometimes you're like fine with certain people dying, and in this one I just wanted them all to survive. Even like when they had some like internal like fights or conflict within like their family groups or friend groups, you still don't want to see any of them go. I love how they played with like some elements of like race and culture, but it didn't feel like it was over the top or distracting. It was like woven in like pretty efficiently here, and it made sense for like the time period. Like it might have been weird if like this took place in like modern times and they had like a similar script. It would be like, wait, what? But like because of when it was, how certain like mingling between characters happened. I love the fact that like they talked, or our two main characters, they talked about this is why we went up north and this is why we ended up coming back. I mean, I love how that was written into the story, and it makes sense. But it never felt like they went overboard with like explaining it. It just made sense within the confines of the story they were trying to tell. I love the development of how it starts out with the brothers, and then they're kind of recruiting people to the grand opening of their event, and like how they go and get random characters in a small town to help them. Man, it was just good. Like it's one I wish I would have been able to see it again. It was hard. It would have been hard for me to fit in, especially with the running time. It is almost what, just under 2.5 hours. So like it's not easy to get multiple watches in like a small time period. But yeah, yeah, that musical number was like good. I love what they said with it, and I overall I was impressed. And it's funny because I had probably seen this trailer like, a dozen times when seeing other horror movies, and I always thought it looked kind of interesting, but like it never crossed my mind that like it was going to be such like an epic like presentation. And then like I'm about 45 minutes into it at the theater. I'm like, damn, like this is like big scope we're going with here. Like I thought it was going to be like a much smaller movie. Like I never looked up what the running time was, so I thought it was going to be like your 90-minute. Okay, these two guys are going to like be partying at like a shack and like things go south. Like I thought it was going to be that simple, because I didn't look up much about it. And as we're getting into the movie, I was like, damn, this is like just very well done. It's like it was so much more than I was expecting it to be, and in a good way. And yes, like so far, like I saw another movie over the weekend that I think is like also like close to the top for the year, but I can't take the number one spot from Sinners right now. Like it was just so good in every way. Like I would say even beyond just a horror movie, I think just for cinema period, it was excellent. So, just so I don't repeat like things Venom said, I'll leave it there. But yeah, this is an epic movie. I don't see it not being on my top 10. Like, yes, it could get pushed out at number one because we're only in April, but like, I don't know if there's gonna be 9 better movies than this. Probably not, but we'll see. The year is still young technically, but I'll leave it there for now. Back to you, Venom.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to echo that sentiment. This isn't just my favorite horror movie of the year. This is my favorite movie of the year. And I go see everything, folks. I have the AMC A-list pass. I go see movies at my leisure. I generally see 2 to 3 movies every week in theaters, and yeah, Sinners is by far the best film, regardless of genre, in 2025, at least that I've seen. Admittedly, I haven't seen every single movie by any stretch, but anything that even mildly interests me, I will absolutely go see. I also wanted to echo another point that Mike made about the racism in this movie. If you guys remember, a couple of years ago, we had that movie Antebellum, which I famously hated. I just hated that movie because it just felt like the whole movie, the narrative was, black people good, white people bad. And it just felt so dull and fairly meaningless to me. But this movie does not lean into the racism, and I love that. Yeah, the racism is here. We get the N-word a lot, but it's not like constant. It's not constantly being thrown in your face. For the majority of the movie, there's only one white person in the movie. So it's definitely a 90% black cast, which I definitely appreciate. The time period absolutely works. I mean, 1940s Mississippi Delta, you've got hoodoo practitioners, and it's definitely hoodoo, not voodoo. There is a difference between the two. Look it up if you don't know the difference. I think it's got more to do with the region. Voodoo is more like New Orleans, Louisiana. Hoodoo is more, like I said, Mississippi, Georgia, that area, blah, 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 blah. Anyway. And then another thing that none of us have actually brought up is our main antagonist, Remick. I thought Remick was fucking great. Jack O'Connell as Remick, he gives this kind of, how can I put it? This almost charisma, charm that you don't always see from a vampire. Yes, vampires are charming, sexy sometimes, blah, blah, blah. But this guy was not only smart, but he actually had a heart, and that's what, and we're going to start delving into spoiler territory before we even get into the walkthrough. So this is going to be your final warning. If you haven't seen Sinners, go see it. I mean, it's not even a suggestion. It's a command. Go fucking see it right now. It is a great film. Yes, it's not going to work for everybody. Like I said, I've already spoken to a couple of people that flat out hate it, but I try not to associate with people like that. So anyway, but Remick, what a spectacular performance, and so subdued. Like he didn't have to be this wild, over the top, almost like Nick Cage in Renfield as Dracula. Like he didn't have to give that kind of over the top vampire performance. It was a very subtle, subdued performance, and whenever he would speak to people that hadn't been turned yet, it's like his words made sense. They rang true. It's like, before I go on with this point, there's also another caveat to this that I have. I absolutely love that these vampires are not concerned with feeding. Did you guys notice that? Not one person is quote unquote killed in this movie. They're all turned. Not one person is killed. I actually thought that maybe Delroy's character was killed because he gets swarmed by a bunch of vampires there at the end. But if you guys remember the Lord's Prayer scene where all the vampires started saying the Lord's Prayer in unison, Delta Slim was there in the background. So that makes it official. Literally not one person killed outright in this movie. And that's so refreshing to me because vampires are usually, these bloodthirsty monsters that treat humans like cattle. I mean, literally, we've seen vampire movies where they literally say the words, humans are just food. They're below us. They're cattle. The vampires in this movie did not have that attitude. They wanted everyone to join them to grow their numbers so that they could go and literally, like Remick actually says that as soon as we're done here, we're going to go visit that Hogwood guy. So literally, these are vampires with all sorts of people. You've got Chinese, you've got Irish, you've got black people all together. They use the word fellowship multiple times in the movie. And the theme of fellowship really almost makes you want to become a vampire, especially in 1940s Mississippi, where black people will never, ever be looked at as equal human beings. But if you're all vampires, the color of your skin doesn't mean anything. You're all the same. So I absolutely love that aspect of it. Another thing that I like that this movie did was the hive mind mentality. Basically, as soon as someone becomes a vampire, they share all the thoughts of every other vampire, including Remick. So there's one scene in the movie where Remick turns a Chinese man and suddenly he can speak Chinese. I love that. That's such a subtle little thing that I just absolutely adored. I thought it was so cool. And that leads to the whole fellowship thing. The fact that they have this one mindset, this hive mind mindset, where they're all about the same goal. You know, there's no factions, there's no infighting. It's an organized group who's literally just trying to make all people equal. And it almost, I mean, when you watch the movie, you definitely don't think that the vampires are the protagonists, but it almost makes it seem that way, especially when Remick talks to Smoke about how you're never going to be equal. You're always going to be a secondary person, but I can fix that for you. I can make you equal to all of us, and we can spend the rest of eternity making sure that this world is equal, get rid of the racists or turn them, and then they suddenly are no longer racist, because the very first two people that Remick turns are Klan members. But once they're turned, they abandon the Klan mentality and they're like, no, we just want to be all together in fellowship and sharing and the family. And it almost makes it hard to hate these vampires, honestly, or at the very least to hate Remick. So the fact that Coogler brought vampirism into this time period as a metaphor for equality is fucking brilliant. I don't care. It is absolutely amazing. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't like that kind of subtext, or at least doesn't look for that kind of subtext in your horror films, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if you are, as Don put it, a cinephile where you're actually looking at performances and cinematography and writing and things like that, this movie is an absolute masterpiece. I've already said that word 6 times, and I don't like to throw that word around easily. Like, I don't even think I called Longlegs, my #1 movie from last year, a masterpiece, because I still had 1 or 2 little problems with it. I literally have nothing wrong with this movie. Literally on second watch, I'm like, all right, I got to find something to nitpick, because people aren't going to believe me when I say I had no problem with this movie, but I didn't. About the only thing that I could think of is maybe Hogwood's performance, the Klan member, the old guy. Something about his performance seems a little stale, but even that doesn't mess up the movie. It doesn't ruin any scenes that he's in. And like I said, we get 3 distinct endings in this movie, and I'm here for all of them. The first one is obvious. That's the one that you have to have. The second one, you could make the argument that it was unnecessary, that it didn't really add anything to the story. But like I said, as a minority, it absolutely added something to the story. I had an ear-to-ear grin during that entire second ending. I literally stood up and clapped on first watch. The first time I watched it in a sold-out theater, mind you. It wasn't sold out when I saw it the second time because it was Sunday morning, but I saw it Friday night the first time. Sold-out theater. And I absolutely applauded when a certain character met their end during that second ending. And then the third ending comes as a mid-credit scene, which I fucking love. I absolutely love it. That one was necessary, because if we don't get that third ending, bits of the story are left dangling. Like, we're left wondering what happened to a couple of the characters, but then we get that answer during that third ending, and then we still get a post-credit scene, which isn't even really a scene of the film so much as it's just Miles Catton as Sammy just performing a song. And it is stellar. Again, it is just an amazing song. I mean, this kid, I don't know if I want this kid to be a musician or an actor, because he's fucking amazing at both of them. He's definitely going to be, well, I was going to say the next Jennifer Lopez, but Jennifer Lopez isn't exactly considered a great actress, so that might not be the right example. Cher, maybe? Cher, because Cher won an Oscar, and she's won an Oscar and a Grammy, so Maybe that's the better analogy. But yeah, this kid just amazing. So yeah, definitely. If you go see the movie and you haven't already, definitely stay for the mid-credits scene. It's vital, in my opinion. But the post-credits scene isn't as vital. It's just a musical performance, like I said. So, but man, like I said, I could go on forever. Go ahead, Mike. Shut me up.
I also think the beauty of the mid-credit scene too is it offers kind of a duality between like, oh, this could be the ending, or it could leave an opening for Sinners too. Like if they wanted to go that route. Now,
sure.
One of the issues is like how likely is it that a sequel would be as good? I mean, it'd be a tough thing to pull off, but hey, the way they left it off is like it's possible, but it doesn't. It could very well just be the end of the story, which I tend to think it at least for all the people that were involved in making it. I wouldn't put it past a studio to be like, well, it made enough money, so we're doing it whether you guys want to participate in or not. So, but and I liked the mid-credit scene, and I like how like you saw the path of kind of like the protagonist, and then everything kind of comes full circle in that scene, and we get some questions answered, which is cool. Like I like that.
And then the cherry on top of this amazing Sunday, fucking Buddy Guy, the legendary blues guitar player in the movie as Old Sammy. At the end of the movie, when that final scene takes place, Buddy fucking Guy. I'm sorry, I was floored when I saw him. I'm like, are you kidding me? How the hell do you get and obviously because it's directed by Ryan Coogler, it makes total sense, because he's obviously, because of his work on the Black Panther movies and the Creed movies and whatever else he's worked on, he's definitely building this great reputation as an auteur. So, but I mean, like I said, when I saw Buddy Guy in there as Old Sammy, I flipped the fuck out. I just could not get over it. I mean, that was the cherry on top of the sundae for me with this movie on this spectacular 10 out of 10 Sunday. So I'll turn it over to my co-hosts if they have anything else they want to add. Otherwise, we will get into our walkthrough. Obviously, this is a 2.5-hour movie. I'm going to try to be fast, but as you can already tell, I've been gushing over this movie the entire time, and I'm going to be gushing over this movie during the entire walkthrough. So, gentlemen, anything else you want to add before we get into it?
I'm good.
I would just say pay Ryan Coogler whatever he wants for his next movie. Whatever.
Oh, yeah, and that's the other thing, too. Sinners is the first Ryan Coogler movie that's not either a sequel, a franchise film, or, something from a previous IP. This is his first original screenplay. That's why I'm thinking he's going to get an Oscar nomination for original screenplay, because like I said, he's done superhero movies, he's done boxing movies, all part of bigger franchises, but this is his first original IP, and god damn, he hit a home run on his first attempt. So yeah, rock on Ryan Coogler. And he did, of course, write and direct this one too, in case we didn't mention it already. All right, folks, that's going to be your final. Well, I mean, we've already been talking spoilers, so if you're still with us, let's go ahead and get into this walkthrough. Our movie opens up with a monologue. We get an animated sequence, and we hear the voice of Annie talk about how in every generation there are musicians that are so in tune with music and the world around them that they can conjure spirits from the past and the future. That's a very important little piece of dialogue, or monologue, excuse me, that will come into play later in the film. So our movie opens after we get our title card, we see a young Sammy Moore. He's covered in blood. He's got a broken guitar in his hand, and he's got claw marks on his face. Like, it looks like a bear fucking just raked his face. He walks into a church where his father, who is a pastor, is giving sermon. He walks into the church. Everything stops once they see Sammy, the son of the pastor, covered in blood with injuries all over him, blah, blah, blah. The pastor walks up to him and then starts preaching, starts talking to the congregation about how my son met the devil last night. My son, heard the call of evil and he came out the other end, and here he is, ready to profess his faith to the Lord. And he basically tells his son to drop the broken guitar that he's holding. He's basically just holding the neck of an acoustic guitar. Very obviously, he smashed the guitar on somebody or something. The preacher is there egging him on. Drop the guitar, son. Please drop the guitar. Make your commitment to Christ. And then the scene ends, and then we get a jump back 24 hours. We go back one day earlier to find out the events that led up to this opening scene. Here we meet Smoke and Stack. They are both played by Michael B. Jordan. One of them's named Elias. One of them is named Elijah. I forget which is which, but we're going to call them Smoke and Stack. Smoke is the more level-headed one. He's the money guy. He's the one who takes plans and puts them into effect. He's the planner. He's the problem solver. You know what I mean? He's the more no-nonsense guy. Stack is not the complete opposite of him. Stack is still very much like his brother, except he's a little bit more loose. Like, he's the idea man. He comes up with the ideas, and then Smoke puts them into effect. And Stack is definitely a little bit more fun-loving. It seems like he drinks a little bit more, blah, blah, blah. But like I said, for the most part, you can still tell that these are twin brothers. They're not polar opposites of each other, which I absolutely appreciate. Now, when we meet the brothers, they are coming back to the Mississippi Delta for the first time in 7 years. During the 7 years that they've been gone, they've gone to World War II. As we mentioned earlier, Stack mentions that they were in the trenches in Germany, which places them in Germany in either March or April of 1945. And like I said, in that 7-year time that they were outside of the Mississippi Delta, they were at war, or they were in Chicago, supposedly working for Al Capone. We obviously never get real confirmation of that. We just get a character in the movie basically say, I thought you were up north working for Capone. That's why I was saying earlier that I kind of placed the movie in either 1946 or 1947, because Al Capone died, I forget the January 25th, 1947. So, Smoke and Stack have decided to buy an old sawmill in the area. And the old sawmill is obviously closed, abandoned, it's disheveled, it looks old and abandoned. And basically they're buying the property and the building from a guy named Hogwood. He doesn't come off as ultra racist right away, though he does call them boy, which kind of upsets them to the point where one of them pulls out a gun. I think Smoke pulls out a gun, and then Stack pulls out his knife. The guy instantly is apologetic, like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. They give him the bag of money. They buy the property. They let him know that if I see you or any of your clan member buddies come anywhere near our property, we're going to shoot you on sight. And then Hogwood looks at him and says, hell, the clan don't exist no more, which we all know that's bullshit because it's 2025 and the fucking clan still exists. So, yeah, go figure. Anyway, they decide that they want to open that same night. Like they've got a quick timeline, a quick turnaround for this. As it turns out, when they came back to Mississippi from Chicago, they brought a truck full of liquor with them. Irish beer, Italian wine, and a bunch of whiskey from Chicago. We'll learn more about how they got that stuff later in the film. But basically, they've got this truck full of liquor. Smoke decides to take the truck and go into town to try to collect up some people to help them with the juke joint. They're basically opening a juke joint. I may not have mentioned that yet. It's basically a club for blues and ragtime music, and it's literally called Club Juke. So like I said, we have a couple of pieces. We have a couple of set pieces where they go to different places. They go to a Chinese market They recruit the husband and wife of that family. The husband is, the wife is going to be tending bar and making signs for the place. The husband is going to be running card games in the back, because there is going to be a makeshift casino in the back of the juke joint. So they also go to, it's funny too, because when the movie started, we see black people picking cotton. So instantly you think it's like an antebellum period movie, but no, these aren't slaves. These are paid employees. They're called sharecroppers. They work for the plantation owners. They're not slaves. They're paid. They have a daily quota that they have to meet. So, like I said, slavery's been ended for over 50 years at this point. While in town, Smoke has a little bit of an interaction with Delta. What's his name? Delta Slim, who is, of course, played by the incomparable Delroy Lindo. I love him. Every time I see him in a movie, the movie instantly gets better, and this movie is no different. As soon as he's in there, he gives this movie that grizzled old blues musician quality that no one else in this movie could possibly bring. Just amazing. Smoke introduces Delta, what's his name? Delta Slim, to Preacher Boy Sammy. Sammy's nickname is Preacher Boy because his father, of course, is a preacher. So his musical name is going to be Preacher Boy Sammy. They end up jamming together right there in the street. They make beautiful music together, and Delta Slim decides to take Stack's offer. It's Stack that makes him the offer, to take Stack's offer to, play at the club for $20 a night plus all the beer you can drink. Apparently, this area is so poor that they've never even had real beer. They have corn liquor. That's the cheapest that you can get, corn whiskey or whatever. But when Delroy takes a sip of that Irish beer, he is just instantly transfixed, and he's like, all right, let's do it. Even though he had repercussions about doing it, because he would have to quit a job that he's already had for 10 years to play at this juke joint, he still ends up doing it after he tastes the beer and realizes that it's delicious and that he can drink as much as he wants. Now, at the same time, we see Smoke. Smoke is going to visit a woman that he used to have a relationship with in this town. Her name is Annie. Once again, I mentioned her earlier. Woomy, who, of course, we know from Loki and Lovecraft Country. As it turns out, Smoke and Annie had a child who unfortunately died either in childbirth or at a very young age, because he's just a baby when he passes. He ends up kind of reconnecting with her. Of course, they have some friction because he left 7 years ago, never wrote, never visited, never did anything. But obviously they rekindle a little bit of a romance. They end up having sex, blah, blah, blah. We also see that young Sammy meets a girl named Perline while he's out running his errands with Stack. He meets a young, beautiful girl named Perline. Turns out she is a blues singer who's probably going to be interested in going to the club, because they're calling it like an open mic, all blues musicians are welcome to come and play. And we actually do get a few different musical performances in the juke joint, which we'll get to in a little bit. He ends up going to the fields where, we see the people picking cotton. He recruits Cornbread. The guy's name is Cornbread. I'm not sure what his real name is, but yeah, they all call him Cornbread. And he basically is being recruited to be like the bouncer, because he's like a big dude. There's a kind of a funny interaction between him and Stack, where Stack kind of says, well, if your wife ain't gonna let you do this job, fuck her. And he, of course, Cornbread gets pissed off because, he's like, that's my wife, please respect her. And Stack don't give a shit. Stack is just about business. Let's get it done. Eventually he is able to talk Cornbread into coming out. So eventually, our two brothers have recruited everybody. They recruit like probably about 12 to 24 people that they bring out to the club to, clean the floors, get the tables ready, get the kitchen ready, because they literally brought, I think they said they bought something like 100 catfish to fry up and make catfish sandwiches that night. So they have to obviously get the kitchen ready. They got it. There's no bathroom. I think there's not even an outhouse. Like people just got to go to the bathroom outside, which kind of sets up a cool set piece later, which we'll talk about. So yeah, basically these people are all at the club getting it ready for its grand opening. Now the scene changes and we see just a white man running through the desert towards a single isolated house in the desert. Now the guy has like marks all over him. I don't know if they're necessarily burn marks, but he looks like he's been tortured. It looks like somebody's been throwing acid on him or something. He knocks on the door of this couple's house, tells them that there's Indians chasing him. The couple doesn't believe him because they're like, we haven't seen Indians in this area in fucking years. And he actually says, are you sure they weren't like light-skinned black people or something? Like he's so convinced that there's no Indians around here. Native Americans, I should say. Natives. Eventually the couple relents because he offers them money. Obviously the couple is poor. They're living like in a shack in the middle of a desert somewhere. So the guy pulls out some coin out of his pocket and says, look, I got money. I'll give it to you. Just please don't let them hurt me anymore. Eventually they let him in. And then right away at that moment, we see Choctaw Indians, Native Americans, coming over to the house, knocking on the door, looking for this person. The wife of the household answers the door with a shotgun and basically tells the native, get out of here. We don't want your kind here. And he's like, listen, I don't want to bother you, but we're looking for someone who came through this area. He's a very dangerous man. He's not what he appears to be. If he's in your house, you may already be in danger. So please just tell me if he's here. Of course, the wife lies and says, no, he's not here. Then suddenly we see the sun start going down and we see one of the other Choctaw Indians say to the guy at the front door, hey, we got to go before it's too late. And we see the sun just getting lower and lower in the sky. The native at the door basically in his native tongue gives the woman a blessing, something along the lines of, may God protect your house and family. And then he kind of walks away. The wife then goes upstairs to the upstairs of her house. She's calling out to her husband, but she's not getting an answer. Finally, she walks into their bedroom and she sees the guy that came to the door sitting in a rocking chair with sharp fangs in his mouth, blood coming out of his mouth, red glowing eyes, and long claws on his hands. When she sees this, she looks down on the floor, sees her husband lying dead on the floor, and the guy basically looks at the wife and says, oh, no, don't worry, he's just resting. And then suddenly, right after he says that, the guy gets up, kind of, stretches and works out the kinks, and then he turns and look at his wife, and he's got the same look as the other guy: red eyes, blood from the mouth, sharp teeth, blah blah blah. Now, what's funny is that I think Ryan Coogler purposely put a curveball in here. The fact that there were Native Americans, did anybody else think this was going to be werewolves? Now, obviously, if you saw the trailer, you probably already knew this was vampires. But since I didn't see the trailer and these were Native Americans chasing this guy, I honestly thought it was going to be like a werewolf or a skinwalker situation. Like he was, a skinwalker, a Wendigo, something along those lines. But no, my friends, it is a vampire. Yes, the guy who knocked at their door is Remick, played by Jack O'Connell, which you'll also see Jack O'Connell as the main antagonist in 28 Years Later when that comes out. So Jack O'Connell's definitely lining up 2025 to be a big year for him, because this performance here is stellar. I can only assume that the performance in 28 Years Later is going to be good as well, but we'll get to that. So now it is we go back to the juke joint. At this point, the juke joint is open. People are there. They're dancing. Delroy Lindo, Delta Slim, I should say, is on stage playing piano by himself. And, we see, different things. I also forgot to mention Mary. Mary is a mostly white woman. She's part black. I think played by Haley Steinfeld, who you guys know from True Grit and the Hawkeye series on Disney Plus, the Marvel series. She basically had a relationship with Stack before Smoke and Stack left Mississippi. And she's actually very upset with Stack because she actually waited for him. She thought that he would be back. Apparently she was, because this was 7 years ago. So she was so young and naive that she believed that he would be back. Of course, he didn't come back for 7 years. At this point, Mary has already been married to a white man with a farm, a plantation. She's doing well, but obviously she still holds animosity towards Stack. That night at the juke joint, Mary shows up. Now, don't forget, the juke joint was intended to be Africans only, black people only. They were not intending to allow white people in there, only not necessarily to keep white people out, but only because in 1946, 47 Mississippi, if a black man even looks at a white man the wrong way, he could get lynched. If he steps on the white man's shoe, he could get lynched. You know what I mean? So they wanted to keep white people out of the club for their own safety, not because they don't trust white people. They just don't want to have any. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, back then, segregation was pretty much the norm anyway. So they were creating a space for them to have their party, basically.
Absolutely. Definitely. Hey, you got to have a spot for the juke joint, man. Juke joint's important. I would imagine in Mississippi Delta, blues music is, it's kind of like high school football in Texas. It's practically a religion, So anyway, let's see. So where are we now? We're back at the juke joint. Oh, right. Mary shows up. At first, Cornbread doesn't want to let her in because, again, she's mostly white. I mean, she's what, 7/8 white. She said that, I think she said her mother was a quarter black or something like that, or her father was a quarter black, which makes her like an eighth black or something, even though she still looks like a white woman. I mean, it's Haley Steinfeld, or I think that's how you pronounce her name. Yeah, Steinfeld. So you know who she is if you've ever seen her in other stuff. She's very obviously a white woman. But because her mother, who was, a quarter black, so it was the mother, not the father. Her mother, who was a quarter black, actually, it turns out she raised Smoke and Stack. Smoke and Stack were basically abandoned by their abusive father, and she basically raised them. And when Stack asks Mary why she's even still in town, because he thought she had left town, it turns out Mary's mother had died. She was upset at Stack for not coming to the funeral or sending flowers or anything, blah, blah, blah. But like I said, she shows up at the juke joint just to kind of support Sammy. She likes Sammy. She likes his playing. And also, she doesn't have any major problem with Smoke. I mean, they do seem to have kind of a weird relationship where they kind of look at each other, but they don't really talk a whole lot. Stack is the one who talks to Mary the most. Okay, so at this point now we get our first musical performance, and basically Delta Slim introduces Sammy. He tells Sammy to introduce himself, tell him where he's from, what his name is, blah, 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 blah. And he starts playing, and basically he turns it into part of the song where he starts playing on the guitar, the steel guitar, and, starts talking about himself. I'm from this plantation down the road. My name is Sammy Moore. My daddy's a preacher, which is why they call me Preacher Boy. And then he starts singing, and my fucking God, the voice on this kid. I'm sorry. Like I said, this kid has the soul of a 60-year-old in that voice. And if you don't know what I mean, go fucking listen to it. Just go listen to a track from this soundtrack. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. This kid's voice is spectacular. Like, I'm actually going to seek him out now. Now that I know he's an actual established musician, I'm actually going to seek him out and see if I can pick up some of his stuff. Because that voice is fucking impeccable. So anyway, he starts singing. He starts, playing the guitar, singing. And then suddenly we start to hear the narration from the beginning of the movie again, where they talk about every generation there's a musician who's so in tune with the world and his music that he can conjure spirits from the past and the future. And just as that narration is playing, we start to see people who don't fit in the Mississippi Delta. We start seeing like hip hop guys, like b-boys breakdancing. We see b-boys breakdancing. We see African tribesmen playing drums. We see Amazonian tribesmen kind of dancing, doing that kind of clop, what's it called? Like tap dancing style thing that they do. We even see, once we see the Chinese couple, we even see like ancient Chinese dancers, like in beautiful Chinese garb, dancing all through. And not only that, but as the camera is moving through the club, the music is actually changing. So like when you see the guys breakdancing, you hear that kind of traditional hip hop that they would listen to in the 80s to breakdance. Or when they show the girl in the kitchen twerking, they'll play like modern hip hop, more newer hip hop. When they show the Asian dancers dancing, you start hearing like Asian like guitars and different instruments playing in the background. And then finally, when they say the line spirits from the past and future, right when they say future, we see like a Parliament Funkadelic style guitar player, like I said earlier, like a George Clinton Bootsy Collins type, where he's dressed very flamboyantly and he's playing a flying V guitar, and he's actually playing like a rock guitar solo over the song that Preacher Boy is performing. My friends, I will never be able to put into words how absolutely stellar this fucking scene was. I will never be able to give it justice. This scene has to be experienced in a theater. You guys need to get out there, find an IMAX theater that's showing this, and goddamn, check this movie out. Make sure you go to the bathroom before the movie. It is 2.5 hours long, so empty out before you go. But yeah, this musical sequence, and then finally, after all of the traditional dancers are shown, we see the roof of the juke joint start to burn down, like literally. Obviously, it's a metaphor for they're tearing the roof, they're burning the roof down. The roof is on fire, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, the entire juke joint is on fire and in shambles. Obviously, it's a metaphor for Sammy doing such a spectacular job with his song that he fucking burned the house down. But while Sammy was singing that song, a note that he sang rang out into the darkness, and Remick heard it. Remick heard the singing and realized, that's where I need to go tonight. Okay. So basically, the performance is over. Everybody's praising Preacher Boy, saying that was amazing, blah, blah, blah. We get some other random things that happen in the club. There's like an argument over some loaded dice in the card room. There's some argument over the catfish sandwiches and potentially, making one of the characters have to shit himself, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go over every single little thing that happens in the club, but I'm going to try to go over the important stuff. So at this point, Remick and the two people that he ran into, obviously he has transformed them both. They are both now vampires. All three of them basically show up at the juke joint. And Remick introduces himself. He says, "Hey, my name is Remick," obviously in an Irish accent because Remick is Irish. So, he introduces himself and he says, I hear tell of a party going on in here with food and drink and blues music being played. And me and my friends would love to join you. We've got money to spend and we even brought our instruments. We can play for you, too. Now, obviously, these are three, very Southern white people. Smoke and Stack both are like, this does not sound like a good idea. Yes, they have money. And there's even a scene in the movie where they talk about the club on its first night lost so much money that they're going to be out of business within 2 months. But at the moment that he makes that line, that's when Remick shows up. And it's like, bitch, you ain't going to be around 2 months anyway. Anyway. Remick and the other two people decide to play a song for Smoke and Stack at the front door. And they do this very, like I said, very antebellum kind of slave period song. about picking a rabbit clean. Pick that rabbit clean, pick that rabbit clean, something along those lines. And it actually is a pretty good song. It is very, like I said, slave era. It's a very obvious slave era song, which I thought was going to upset the black people, but they didn't really get upset. They actually, a couple of them actually were like, wow, that ain't bad. They're not bad. Maybe we should let them in. That's when Smoke kind of makes the decision. No, we're not letting them in. I don't care how much money they have. You know, if something happens here and one of them decides to go to the Klan and say that they had a problem here, the Klan's going to come here and wipe us out. So Smoke puts his foot down and says, no, they're not allowed in here. A few minutes later, Mary decides to go out and see them, being the only other white person in, the juke joint or the general area. She decides that because the brothers already know that this place isn't going to be around that long because of, they're hemorrhaging money, basically. She decides, all right, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to talk to these three people and I'm going to see if they're legitimate, if they're legitimately non-Klan members, good people with actual money. So she goes outside and the three of them are performing a song, and they're performing a song about fellowship and love. I think the name of it is actually Fellowship and Love. And it kind of foreshadows what Remy is going to, or what Remick is going to say later to Smoke about why he's, turning all these people into vampires. So anyway, Mary is talking to them. They come off as very friendly, all three of them. Mary lets them know that the only reason I'm even here is because my mama died recently, and all three of them are very sad. They give their condolences. And then Remick suddenly turns to her, and that's when we see the red glow in his eyes for the first time. And he says to Mary, I so wish that I could have met you sooner, because maybe if I had, I could have saved your mother from her fate. And of course, Mary's confused. She's like, what are you talking about? And then he goes, I could also save you from your fate. And suddenly we see Remick start to drool. But my friends, this isn't like standard drool. I hate to say it, but it almost looked like scum. It almost looked like sperm, like they were drooling sperm out of their mouth. Because like I said, it didn't look like normal clear saliva. It had like a texture to it. But apparently, and then we see it again later in the film, apparently these vampires drool right before they're about to attack somebody, which I actually kind of find funny. It's kind of interesting. Very similar to that episode about the vampire from Masters of Horror season 2. You guys remember? I don't know if you guys remember that, but that vampire drooled too right before he attacked somebody. So I thought that was kind of cool, bringing that element into it. Mary eventually decides, nope. There's something wrong with you three. I'm out of here. Luckily, Stack gave her a gun. So she's got a gun and she pulls it out and basically says, okay, I think I'm going to go back inside now. And I think you guys need to get the fuck out of here. She turns around to start walking back to the juke joint. And then for a split second, we see Remick launch himself up into the air like he can fly, or at least leap very high. But it's only for a split second, literally a split second. We see him kind of leap into the up into the sky. And then we're back inside the juke joint, and Mary shows up at the front door, looking the same as she did when she left. Cornbread is there, but Mary doesn't just walk into the club. She asks Cornbread to be invited in. Now, obviously, Cornbread, he's not the smartest guy in the world, so he doesn't question why she's been going in and out all night, but now she needs to be invited in. Obviously, savvy horror fans know exactly what's happening, but nobody in the movie does. So Cornbread relents, he invites her in, and she walks in. At that point, she watches Perlene's performance. Perlene, the girl that Preacher Boy has a crush on and actually ends up having sex with later in the film. A married woman, by the way, a young, beautiful married woman who's at a juke joint without her husband, but she's okay with letting Preacher Boy go down on her. So whatever. Perlene does her performance. During her performance, she grabs Stack, Mary, excuse me, not Perlene. Mary grabs Stack and starts dancing on the dance floor. Eventually, she starts rubbing her ass up against his crotch. they get horny and they go to a side room, a private room off to the side. Mary starts kind of making out with Stack, and then she starts drooling that same drool that Remick was drooling outside, which, again, I fucking loved. But instead, what's funny is that instead of Stack freaking out about her drooling, he lets her drool into his mouth, which, if you've seen modern day porn, you've probably seen that before, the whole, saliva swap thing. But yeah, for a movie that takes place in the 1940s, I thought that was kind of advanced perversion, spitting in each other's mouth, but whatever. At one point, then there's an altercation in the club with some loaded dice. One of the gamblers ends up slashing another one of the gamblers across the face. Smoke has to interject. They beat the shit out of the guilty party, the one who had the loaded dice. And then, but he needs Stack to give this guy stitches, because Stack apparently knows how to do stitches. He knows how to roll cigarettes, and Smoke doesn't. Isn't it funny that the guy named Smoke doesn't know how to roll his own cigarettes? I found that kind of interesting. But anyway, let's see. At this point, Smoke tells Sammy to go get Stack so that Stack can give this guy stitches. Sammy goes over to the room where he thinks Stack is in. He opens the door, and what he sees is a topless Mary on top of Stack, kind of riding him, cowgirl style, fairly basic cowgirl. He closes the door instantly, embarrassed, and then he goes to get Smoke, and Smoke is like, where's my brother? I told you to go get my brother. Sammy, of course, is like, I'm not interrupting him without you. Considering what they're doing. So Smoke then has to go. But when Smoke opens the door, Mary is no longer riding Stack. She is now biting Stack on the neck. And this bite is fucking gnarly. Like, she pulls a large chunk of his neck out, as we see later. She stands up, realizing that somebody walked into the room, and she starts to apologize. She's like, I'm sorry, it's not what it looks like. But obviously, Smoke looks down on the floor, sees his brother bleeding to death, and without hesitation, he pulls out both of his handguns and just empties both clips into Mary. Unfortunately, after Mary falls down, literally like 2 seconds later, she gets right back up. She looks right at Smoke and says, we're going to kill every last one of you. And then she goes running out of the club. Smoke has one bullet left in the gun. He takes one last shot, but misses Mary. She runs past him and out to the club. And as she's running away from the club, she actually yells, we'll be right back. Just wait for us. It's kind of funny. Like I said, at this point, Stack now dies. Stack succumbs to his injuries. He passes out. He dies. Smoke is obviously very emotional because, like I said, these two brothers legitimately love each other. They hug each other multiple times in the movie and tell each other that they love each other. So it was definitely a sad moment to watch Stack kind of succumb to his injuries. Now, at this point, Annie, Smoke's ex that he had a child with, as it turns out, she is a hoodoo practitioner. She's a witch. I guess a witch is might not be the exact term in the Mississippi Bayou, but let's go with witch. She basically is a practitioner of hoodoo. After Stack is killed, she does that thing where she grabs a bunch of like chicken bones and different little pebbles and things and throws them on a table to see the formation that they make. She does this 3 or 4 times, realizing, I think we're fucked. And that's when she goes to Smoke and says, hey, Smoke, we need to move your brother's body. We just need to put him outside. We don't have to do anything to him. Just let's go take him outside and then come back inside. Smoke obviously is like, no, this is my brother. This ain't just some dead body. So he refuses to drag Stack's body outside. At first, Annie thinks that they're hates. Now, hates in the hoodoo religion is basically someone who, it's almost like a changeling. someone who replaces someone outright. You know, they replace their soul within their body. Maybe a changeling isn't the exact right term, but it's the closest thing I can come up with right now. So basically, she thinks that's what they are, that they're hates, Haite. And yes, that is an actual term in the Hoodoo religion. You can look it up. Anyway, after Mary runs out of the place, though, she asks Sammy, did she say anything as she left? And Sammy just says, yeah, she said, we're going to kill every last one of you. And then you see like Annie react like, wait a minute. She said, we are going to kill every last one of you. And Sammy, confirms that, yeah, she said we. That's when Annie makes the realization that these are not hates. These are vampires. And she actually says the word vampire. So as it turns out, yes, there are vampires in this world. And she explains to the rest of the group that, vampires are worse than hates because they can basically create more vampires at will. And, obviously the sun can kill them. Holy water can kill them. Obviously, where are you going to get holy water? In this part of the Mississippi Delta on an evening. I don't know what day of the week it is, but I can assume it's like a Friday or Saturday. Actually, yes, it's Friday night, because earlier in the film, Sammy tells his father how he worked hard all week and that he should be able to enjoy his days off. So it's Friday night. So, for a Friday night, this place is busy, blah, blah, blah. After Annie explains everything about vampires and what to do, they start collecting up like garlic. They start making stakes, like pointed stakes. They start breaking up the wood. And at that point, Delroy Lindo basically says, all right, everybody out, party's over. And they're basically shutting the doors for the night because of Stack's death, obviously. Everybody ends up walking out. Eventually, the Chinese couple have a conversation where the wife is like, hey, we didn't sign up for this. We signed up to help these guys run a juke joint. We didn't sign up for anything involving murder and blood and attacks. So she tells her husband to go get the car. Now, if you're wondering how rich these people are to be able to own a car in 1946, they actually own 2 stores in this town right across the street from each other. So obviously this Chinese family is doing very well here. So the husband goes out to try to get the car. We don't see him again for a few minutes. But then suddenly, somebody thinks that there might still be a vampire in the club because they find what they think is a dead body in the kitchen. They see a dead body. They see a pool of blood under it. So they're like, we got to get rid of this guy before he wakes up, because if he was killed by a vampire, he's obviously going to wake up as a vampire very soon. They end up dragging him outside and locking the door behind them. Then Annie has the idea of everybody needs to eat a clove of garlic just to make sure that there's no more vampires in here. Everybody that's locked in here is here with us in this room, so everybody eat a clove of garlic. So we get the scene where everybody eats a clove of garlic. There's a little bit of an altercation because Pearline doesn't want to take it because she claims she doesn't like garlic. At that point, Smoke pulls out his gun, points it at her, and says, either you eat the garlic or you eat this bullet. you choose. Obviously, Sammy's not happy that Smoke is holding a gun up to this girl that he has feelings for, but it doesn't matter. She does eventually relent, eat the garlic without any major problems. But then the last person to eat a piece of garlic is Delta Slim. Delta Slim eats a piece of garlic and he starts getting violently ill. Like he starts like screaming and everybody's like, oh shit. Delta Slim is a fucking vampire. Finally, he calms down and he's like, no, I'm fine. I just drank way too much Irish beer and that piece of garlic fucked up my stomach, which is filled with beer. So yeah, as it turns out, Delta is not a vampire. Now, once they realize that none of them are a vampire, Annie says to Smoke, are you sure that was blood in the kitchen? They go back to the kitchen. Smoke dips his fingers into the pool of blood. As it turns out, it's fucking wine. It's not blood. It's a bottle of wine that's spilled. Apparently, the guy that they thought was dead was drinking a bottle of wine and just passed out in the kitchen, dropping the bottle, which then spilled wine under his body. At that exact moment... Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say because you just brought up the scene where they did the garlic test, and there's a trivia tidbit. Ryan Coogler, he said his two biggest influences, obviously from Dusk Till Dawn, no one would be surprised there, but he also listed The Faculty, and in The Faculty they had the homemade drug test, you remember, in the garage to figure out if any of them were one of the body snatcher aliens or whatever. So
but that came from The Thing, though.
That's what I was
originally
say.
originally the thing with the blood test, but so when they did the garlic thing or the garlic test, you can see where like it travels down through generations of horror movies.
Absolutely. All right, so let's see, where are we? Oh, right. The instant that Smoke realizes that wasn't blood, that it was wine, the guy outside wakes up. Obviously still human. He wasn't attacked. He just passed out. He starts banging on the door, like, let me in. I don't know what I did. This guy doesn't know anything about the vampires. He passed out. So he thinks that they just kicked him out of the club because he passed out. So he's banging on the door saying, let me in. Somebody's coming. And then in the background, we see Cornbread coming after him. I totally skipped the scene where Cornbread got turned. Long story short, Cornbread had to take a piss. He got Delta Slim to watch the door for him. While he was out taking a piss, he gets attacked by Remick. And then that's it for that. But then in this scene, the guy, is outside banging on the door. Let me in. I don't know why you guys kicked me out. But then as soon as Smoke opens the door, we see Cornbread come from the side, tackle the guy, and just bite a piece of his face off, like literally a piece of his cheek. It's kind of funny that these people, they want to turn each other, but nobody's biting nicely. Everybody's biting very violently, like it's leaving large like holes in people's bodies, but they are turning into vampires, so the objective is still being met. At that point, the Chinese husband shows up, and literally while Cornbread is on the ground eating this guy's face, he walks up to the door and tells his wife, okay, I got the car. Let's go, honey. Like nonchalantly, like nothing's happening. Literally, Cornbread is eating another human being mere feet away. And the husband's like, don't worry about that. And then he tells the wife, come on, honey. I got the car ready. Let's go. Our daughter's waiting for us. And then the wife says, or Smoke says to the guy, I'm going to figure a way out of this. I'm going to try to save you and your family. But obviously the man is already a vampire. He doesn't want to be saved. And then that's when Remick shows up, and Remick basically tells them that, hey, I'm your only savior. I'm the only one who's going to be able to get you out of here, And then this is where we get that scene where Remick explains his motivation. He's not killing people. No human has been outright killed, as far as like torn to pieces or had their head ripped off or whatever we might see in more over-the-top vampire movies. No, everyone is getting turned. And why are they getting turned? I kind of spoiled it earlier. Remick is basically trying to create a fellowship of all people. So literally, here is a group of vampires consisting of white people, Irish people, black people, Chinese people. It's literally the melting pot that, America thinks it actually is. And he starts to explain to Smoke, you were never going to be free. And this is where they also explain the hive mind mentality, where Remick basically says, I now know everything that Bo does. Bo is the name of the Chinese guy. And that's when he speaks to Bo's wife in Chinese, talking to her about, I even know how you like to be licked, blah, blah, blah. And then he even says, well, let's hurry up because as soon as we're done here, we got to go to the store and get Lisa. And Lisa is, of course, the daughter of the Chinese couple. The wife instantly starts freaking out. She almost runs outside of the place to attack her husband, but obviously that would be suicide. Let's see. Oh, right. Remick continues his explanation about how Hogwood, I already know because that guy back there, basically the first couple that Remick turned, it turns out that the guy is the nephew of Hogwood. And as it turns out, Hogwood is the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Even though earlier in the film he claimed the Klan doesn't exist anymore. But he is the Grand Dragon, and he already had plans to show up at the juke joint the following morning to just kill everybody. Because, you know, don't forget, we live in the Jim Crow South. Now, Jim Crow, here's a little bit of a history lesson for everybody. I'm sure a lot of you people have heard that term, the Jim Crow South, Jim Crow laws. And you're probably wondering who Jim Crow is. Well, Jim Crow is not an actual person. It's not a person who's actually lived. Jim Crow refers to a minstrel, a character from a minstrel show who was very racist, who thought white people should be elevated above all other people. So the term Jim Crow laws just kind of became what the South was known as. So when you hear the word Jim Crow, they're not talking about an actual person. They're just talking about a system of racial segregation and disenfranchisement that prevailed in the American South from the late 19th century to the mid 20th century. So there you go. There's your history lesson for the episode. So after Remick gives his big long explanation about how he's just trying to create a fellowship and a community, it almost looks like Smoke takes a step forward. Like he almost he sees the logic in what Remick is saying, that this is the only way our people are ever going to be equal. We're never going to be equal as human beings, but as vampires, we are absolutely all equal. So he actually has a moment of weakness where he almost steps out to let himself be attacked. But then the rest of the group pull him back in. Stack shows up as a vampire again, trying to convince his brother that this is the only way we're ever going to be free. We are never going to be free. Not here, not in Chicago, not in Europe, not anywhere. This is the only recourse that we have to get freedom. But of course, they end up closing the door. The survivors inside the club end up closing the door. And then we get the musical set piece that a lot of people are calling Vampire River Dance, which it fucking is not. Anybody who calls this scene Vampire River Dance is just showing how little they know about Irish culture. It is not fucking River Dance. It is a traditional Irish jig that Remick is performing while singing a traditional Irish song. Now, what's funny is that at this point, all of the party, all the people that were at the juke joint have been turned. We don't get to see that scene, unfortunately. But yeah, after Delta Slim kicked everybody out of the club, they all piled out, started walking home because obviously most of them don't have cars. And of course, they were all attacked by the original three vampires and Mary, who obviously had already been turned by this point. So we get the Irish dance sequence, which I fucking love. I don't care what anybody says. That was really, really impressive. And what's funny is to see Michael B. Jordan as a vampire dancing in an Irish style, I thought was very interesting, along with all the black people. Like all the black people that have been converted, they're all dancing in a circle, almost like a drum circle, but they're all like dancing around Remick, who is actually singing this song. Like I said, to call this partially a horror musical is not hyperbole, because there are set pieces, musical set pieces in the movie where characters in the movie are singing the songs. So, as opposed to just a traditional score, it's actually more kind of a musical style. And like I said, there's a good 3 or 4 full musical performances in this movie, and I'm here for all of them. Don kind of mentioned earlier that this isn't his style of music. Well, guess what, folks? It ain't mine either. I don't really listen to a lot of traditional African music. I don't listen to any traditional Irish music. But just the way that everything is presented here, how masterfully it's performed, how all the lyrics to all the songs that they're singing are poignant to the situation that they're in right now. I just fucking loved it. It's potentially one of the best musical horror films I've ever seen. Granted, this isn't Repo, the Genetic Opera, by any stretch of the imagination. It's not like there's a song every 5 minutes. Not by any stretch. There's only like 3 or 4 performances in the movie, maybe 5 at most. But I fucking loved every one of them. So, after the vampire Irish jig, we see the vampires start to surround the club. They actually start, and at this point, they're all singing that antebellum song about picking the rabbit clean. They're all singing it in unison. Pick that rabbit clean. Pick that rabbit clean. Which, again, it tickled me for whatever it's worth. Basically, the juke joint is now surrounded by vampires, but obviously they can't come in because in this world, vampires have to be invited in, very Fright Night or, a plethora of other vampire movies. So they're all outside, but eventually the Chinese wife, starts getting really pissy. She's like, what the fuck are we going to do? Are we really just going to sit here and wait for the sun to come up and just let them kill all our loved ones? I mean, they already threatened to kill my daughter, to go back to the store and take her out. And then the wife starts getting really pissy at Smoke because she's like, aren't you a soldier? Aren't you supposed to be a man of action? Why are we sitting here just waiting for the sun to rise? Eventually, she grabs a stake and starts running towards the door. Like she's going to go outside to try to attack the vampires with a stake. They stop her. Unfortunately, in them stopping her, she screams at the top of her lungs, come in here, you motherfuckers, come in here, which is basically catamount to an invitation. And literally, we see the expression on Remek's face change. Suddenly, it becomes an ear-to-ear shit-eating grin. And he's like, we're good to go. And he realizes that they've now been invited in. So now the siege starts. Now the shit hits the fan. Remek opens the front door. The Chinese wife throws a Molotov cocktail at him. Unfortunately, he's able to kind of ricochet it away from him. And then the vampires start piling in. But like I said, at this point, people are armed with garlic, stakes, anything, guns, obviously, even though the guns won't kill them, because obviously none of these people can afford silver bullets, which in this world, silver does still work on vampires, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, this is the siege scene. Big siege, vampires coming in, vampires getting staked through the heart by Smoke, by Annie, just everybody's, and then we get this fucking amazing shot where the Chinese wife literally sacrifices herself to kill her husband as a vampire. She basically pushes him into the fire. Remember I said that she missed with the Molotov cocktail and Remek was able to just kind of throw it aside? She literally tackles, football tackles her husband into the fire. They both go up in flames, but while she's on fire, she buries the stake into her husband's heart, but then of course she ends up burning up as well. And we get that great final image of the husband and wife both burnt to a crisp on top of each other, with the wife holding the stake that's in her husband's chest. Just a beautiful image. I fucking loved it. Obviously more people in the juke club are getting attacked. They're getting turned. A lot of vampires are dying. And then sadly, Stack walks in and attacks Annie, who of course is Smoke's baby mama. Stack attacks Annie, bites her on the neck. She actually lets out a funny line saying, "No, not you." Like she wanted to be turned by anybody but Stack for whatever reason. Smoke sees this, and at the exact same time, he's engaged with Remick. Remick ends up getting shot in the heart, which they explain in the movie. It slows them down, but it doesn't kill them. Like, they might fall over and you might get like a couple of seconds of rest, but they're going to get right back up. So Remick gets shot in the heart. He ends up running outside, and then Smoke sees Annie with the bite mark on her neck. She's gushing blood. Because like I said earlier, the bite marks that these vampires are leaving, they're not just two little puncture wounds like Dracula does. No, they're biting chunks of their fucking neck off of them. Stack's injury looks so gnarly. It looks like Mary bit the shit out of his neck. Anyway, Smoke realizes that, what he needs to do before Annie dies and comes back. And this is another aspect of this movie that I fucking love, that I don't remember ever seeing in another vampire movie. When Smoke kills Annie, both Mary and Stack, as vampires, start almost like weeping, like crying. Like, they're like, "What the fuck are you doing? Why would you kill her?" Like, they're literally upset that he killed a human being. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a vampire value the life of a human who's about to turn into a vampire that much in my life. At least I can't think of any examples of that. And that's an aspect. To actually see Mary and Stack both scream because Smoke stabs Annie, I fucking love that. Absolutely. These are like I said, these are not your normal vampires. They're not concerned with feeding. They're not concerned with elevating themselves above human beings. They're just trying to create a community, a fellowship, as they say, as I've already said about a half dozen times, blah, blah, blah. So after after Annie is mercy killed by Smoke, at this point, all that's left is Smoke, Delta Slim, Pearline, and Preacher Boy. They're basically our last human survivors left. Eventually, Delta Slim sacrifices himself to the vampires. He actually slits his wrist open with a broken bottle to kind of get the vampires' attention. So rather than them going up the stairs to give chase to Smoke and Preacher Boy and them, they attack him. And like I said, at first I thought they killed him, because we see about a couple of dozen vampires fucking converge on Delroy's body. But like I said, we do see his vampire form later in the film. It's very brief. It's one of those blink and you'll miss it situations, but we do see him during the Lord's Prayer scene. So at this point, Smoke goes outside. They find another exit and they try to go out. Unfortunately, Remick and Stack are both there waiting for him. They start getting into the fight, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, Pearline gets attacked by Remick, and she basically tells Preacher Boy to just get the fuck out of here, leave her alone. Like, she doesn't want to be mercy killed the way that Annie wanted to be. But obviously she doesn't want to kill Preacher Boy either when she comes back as a vampire. So she leaves and tells Preacher Boy to get out. Preacher Boy ends up walking out of the barn from the second floor, falling all the way down to the ground. It looked like he broke his leg, but nope, didn't break shit. At that exact moment, Remick gives chase to Sammy, who's now walking out to like a lake. There's like a lake next to the juke joint. Because don't forget, it used to be a, a sawmill. So obviously sawmills are almost always next to bodies of water so that they can transport the raw wood up and down the river. Anyway, Remick is giving chase to Sammy. Smoke is fighting Vampire Stack inside. Eventually, Smoke gets the upper hand on Stack. We see him raise his wooden stake. He's about to bury it into Stack's chest. And he basically says, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Like, he's basically apologizing to his brother that he couldn't protect him from, the rest of the vampires. But then he says something like, brother, you were never going to be able to protect me from this. And then the scene ends. So it's kind of left up in the air whether Smoke actually kills Stack or not. We then go back outside. Remick is chasing Sammy, who's limping. So when I say chase, it's a very slow chase. But like I said, Sammy hurt his leg when he jumped off the building from the second floor. Remick gives chase. This is when we see Remick slash at his face. And then basically he grabs Sammy by the neck, and he basically says to him, I want your songs, I want your stories, I want your experiences, I want you to reunite me with my people. Because like I said, don't forget the monologue at the beginning, a musician so in tune with music that he can conjure spirits from the past and the future. Remick understands that because of Sammy's gifts, he may be able to reunite him with his ancestors from Ireland. I that's the thinking that was going through my head anyway. So he's literally about to bite Sammy's neck, and Sammy starts saying the Lord's Prayer, whatever the hell it is. I'm not a religious guy, so I don't know what the Lord's Prayer is. But anyway, Sammy starts saying the Lord's Prayer. Then Remick starts mimicking him, saying the Lord's Prayer as well. Then suddenly all the vampires, every single vampire that's not dead yet, starts saying the Lord's Prayer in unison. So literally you've got like 24 vampires all saying the Lord's Prayer in unison. As soon as they finish the Lord's Prayer, Remick goes in for the bite, but then we hear a stab sound effect. The camera moves off to the side, showing Smoke killing Remick, basically putting a stake through his heart. Right before Remick dies, Sammy actually hits him with his guitar. And remember, I said it was a steel guitar. If you guys know what a steel guitar is, it's still basically a wooden guitar, but it's got that steel plate on the top of it. Well, on this particular guitar, that plate was not steel. It was fucking silver. So when Sammy smashed the guitar over Remick's head, the steel plate actually went and got buried into his head, and we see all the vampires like writhing in pain. This hive mind mentality, like I said, it's pretty fucking cool. And like I said, eventually Smoke shows up, stabs Remick in the heart. At the exact moment that he stabs Remick, the sun comes up, which I found very confusing, because it's like, if Remick has been a vampire for a while, wouldn't he be aware of what time it is? Like, when the sun is going to rise? Like, it seems odd that literally as the sun is rising, he's still attacking Sammy. So eventually, like I said, we get and by the way, this scene looked amazing. Like, the shot of Remick with the steel plate, or the silver plate in his face, just fucking looked great. The way that his mouth was dragged up, he's got this mouth full of monstrous teeth. It just looks so cool. And with the dark lighting, because it was at night, and then the glow of their red eyes, because all the vampires' eyes kind of glowed red, not ultra bright, but like a little, like their pupils, maybe their pupils were red. So at this point, Remick dies. We see his body basically turn into fire, and it goes and it rises up into the sky. We see the sun come up, killing all the rest of the vampires. Literally at the same time that Remick's body goes up in flames, all the other vampires are suddenly up in flame. And finally, the sun is up and all the vampires are dead. Obviously, at this point, Sammy and Smoke are our last two survivors. Smoke basically gives Sammy his car and says, here, take this, go home and bury that guitar. Don't ever, basically Smoke tells him, don't ever play guitar again. because at one point in the film, Remick actually says, "Oh, Sammy, I'm here for you. I heard you. You called out to me." Remick obviously isn't the devil, but obviously they kind of look at him that way because he heard Sammy's song and was attracted to the juke joint. So at this point, that's our first ending. So our first ending is the vampire ending. That's the end of the vampires there. Remick and all his followers are now gone. The second ending is basically Smoke. If you remember correctly, I mentioned earlier that Remick told Smoke that Hogwood, the guy who sold him the property, was already planning on showing up the next morning and killing everybody. So Smoke, who, don't forget, is military, as it turns out, he brought a crate of military weapons with him, sniper rifles, machine guns, repeating weapons, things like that. So he literally, we see Sammy drive to the church. So now we're back to the beginning of the movie. You remember the opening scene was Sammy showing up at the church, his father begging him to drop the guitar. At the same time, back at the juke joint, we see the clan show up, but they're not dressed in their robes. They're just dressed normal, but they're very obviously Klansmen. They're all, racist. They're all talking about, we're going to kill us some N-words and, we're going hunting tonight. I think one of them says we're going coon hunting or something. Just, crazy offensive. And they try to get into the juke joint, but the door is locked. And they're like, Hogwood basically says, all right, let's go around back and see if that door is open. When they try the back door, suddenly the guy that's trying to open the back door gets shot. We hear a bullet ring out and he goes down. Then we see another guy get shot and he falls down. Then we see another guy get shot and he falls down. Then finally we see Smoke. He's actually perched himself across the street. So he's not actually at the juke joint. He's across the street from the juke joint in the woods, and he's picking off all these Klans members. My God, folks, the ear-to-ear grin that I had on my face watching a racist get shot. Oh, God, it's one of the pleasures of my life, I assure you. So Smoke is taking out racists left and right. Eventually, they realize that they're outgunned. So like 3 or 4 of them get into a truck to try to leave, but Smoke takes a grenade, pulls the pin and throws it into the truck, and the fucking truck goes up, killing everybody in the truck. Unfortunately, right before the grenade exploded, one of the guys that was in the truck did get a shot off that caught Smoke in the liver area, the right side, the bullet, and we see an entrance and exit wound, and he's bleeding pretty profusely. At this point, everybody's dead except Hogwood. Hogwood took a bullet to the stomach, but he's still alive, writhing on the ground. Smoke walks up to Hogwood, asks him for a cigarette. Hogwood tells him to fuck off. And then Sammy reloads his machine gun. I think it's a Tommy gun, if I remember correctly. He reloads his Tommy gun. And then Hogwood's like, all right. He pulls out a pack of cigarettes, hands them to Smoke. Smoke pulls out a cigarette, lights it, and then falls. He kind of falls down to his butt. He doesn't fall all the way back, but he's in the seated position on the ground. He's smoking his cigarette, I don't know if he's just trying to decide what to do with Hogwood, but he's very obviously on the brink of death. You see his eyes are starting to close, but then suddenly he hears a familiar voice next to him, and it's Annie's voice. And Annie basically says, if you put out that cigarette, I'll let you hold him. Smoke looks over to his right, and there's Annie dressed in all white. Obviously, we all know Annie was already killed earlier in the movie the night before. So Annie is there in spirit, dressed all in white, and she's holding their baby. In fact, she's breastfeeding the baby, and she makes a line that I fucking love, and I don't know how many people are going to catch this context, but I caught it right away. She basically tells Smoke, if you put that cigarette out, you can hold him. I don't want you getting any of that smoke on him. Think about that line, folks. I don't want you getting any of that smoke on him. She's not talking about the cigarette smoke. She's talking about Smoke himself and his, criminal lifestyle. And you know how in most Christian religions, people can be total pieces of shit their entire life, but if they repent and ask God for forgiveness right before they die, they will be accepted into the kingdom of heaven. I feel like that's what this scene is. Smoke throwing his cigarette away is symbolism for him walking away from his criminal lifestyle and wanting to live a peaceful life with Annie and his child. And I might be wrong completely, but that's how I took it, and I fucking love it because of that. Just this is Smoke literally saying, okay, I'm done with this world and I want to be with Annie and my child. It's almost like that's him shedding the Smoke nickname. Now he will again be Elias. What's the last name? Moore, I think. So he'll now be just Elias, now Smoke. And I think that is so fucking poignant. Like I said, I don't know how many people actually caught that or if they even tried to, but just that line, I don't want you getting any smoke on him. She's not talking about cigarette smoke. She's talking about Smoke's lifestyle. And I fucking love that. So eventually, Smoke reaches for the child, like Annie's spirit tries to pass the child over to him. He tries to reach over to pick up the baby, but then Hogwood gets his attention and says, hey, I got a lot of money, I can take care of this. I can make this right. And then Smoke unceremoniously empties an entire fucking Tommy gun clip into Hogwood. He had to have shot him about 40 fucking times. It was so satisfying. I'm sorry. The minority in me absolutely loved that. And then after killing Hogwood, he's able to pick up his son. And that scene fades out, and that is now our second ending. Then we're back at the beginning of the movie where Sammy is at the church. He's got the scar on his face from where Remick slashed him with his claws. He's covered in blood. He's got the broken guitar in his hand, and his father is begging him, drop the guitar, son. Confirm your commitment to the Lord. Drop the guitar. Eventually, the scene changes and we see Sammy driving away by himself and he's still holding on to his guitar. And I fucking applauded at that moment. I don't care. Again, like I said, I'm a former musician, and to see this kid choose music, the thing that he loves, over faith, it's so poignant and so powerful that I fucking loved it. And then the last shot of that part of the movie is Sammy, like I said, driving away, and he's holding the broken guitar up against his chest because he finds out at the end of the movie that the guitar was actually Smoke and Stack's father's guitar. So this is actually a family guitar, and he didn't realize that. Stack had lied to him and said that it was a famous musician's guitar that they won in a poker game. But as it turns out, it was Smoke and Stack's father's guitar, which actually meant even more to Sammy than that famous musician. So the credits start rolling, and then we get a mid-credit scene. And when does the mid-credit scene take place? October 6th, 1992. It is now almost 50 years later, and we see an old Sammy up on stage performing, and it's fucking Buddy Guy. Like I said earlier, I flipped the fuck out when I saw Buddy Guy. You guys don't understand. I fucking love the blues musicians, especially legendary ones like B.B. King, Buddy Guy, Robert Johnson. I mean, these are absolute legends of the blues. And to see Buddy Guy in this movie as an old Sammy, I just fucking loved it. But anyway, we see an old Sammy at a bar, a club that he actually owns. He owns this club and he performs in the club. He's had a long musical career. He's put out albums. He's toured the world. I mean, he's lived the life that a musician wants to live. Late one night, like I said, October 6th, 1992, the doorman, walks into the club. It's after closing. It's basically just the bartender and old Sammy at the bar. The guard walks in and says, hey, boss, there's a couple of people outside that said they'd like to come in, but I told them we were closed, but they offered a couple $100. And Sammy's like, yeah, I got no problem with that. Go ahead and let them in. As soon as the security guard says, come on in, you see the expression on Sammy's face change, like he realizes what that security guard just did. He turns his head, and there's fucking Stack and Mary dressed in modern for 1992, because Stack is dressed like he's a member of Belle Biv DeVoe, and Mary is dressed like one of those chicks that you would see in a hip-hop video. So they were very modern, but Stack walks in, doesn't say anything, just sits at the bar next to Sammy. Sammy puts his drink down and looks at Stack and says, how? Because at first they were running on the theory that if they kill the original vampire, that all the others would either be killed or saved. You know, we've seen that in previous movies before, but as it turns out in this world, that's not the case. Even if the original vampire is killed, the people that he turned into vampires can still live on. So here's Stack and Mary. So obviously, this is where we get the confirmation that Smoke didn't kill Stack in that scene. As it turns out, Smoke couldn't bring himself to kill his brother, and Stack couldn't bring himself to kill his brother either, even as a vampire. Like, at various points during their final fight, they both had the upper hand and could have finished each other off, but the love of two brothers even transcended vampirism. So, but basically, Smoke made Stack promise that he would never go after Sammy. Basically, he said, you know, I'll leave you alone, I'll let you live, but promise me that you're never going to go after Sammy, which Stack agrees to. And then here we are almost 50 years later at the club, and Stack just kind of reiterates what we already know, that, you know, just because they killed the original vampire doesn't mean that we all die. We actually can live on even if our master is killed. He explains to Sammy how he promised Smoke that he would never attack him, but then he leans over to Sammy and starts sniffing him. Like, he takes a big whiff, like he sniffs them, and he's like, oh, the end is right around the corner, isn't it, Sammy? You know, I could make it so that you can keep playing music, you can keep touring the world, you can keep making records. Sammy takes a second to think about it and says, nah, I think I've seen enough of this world. I think I'm good. Stack and Sammy embrace, they hug each other. They basically say their goodbyes, because obviously Sammy is not long for this world, so this is probably the last time Stack and Mary are going to see him. As they walk out the door, Mary says, bye, little Sammy. She still calls him little Sammy, even though he's now an old man of at least 70 years old, you know? They walk out the door, and Sammy just kind of lets out a grin. He smiles, and then the movie ends. Then we get our full credits. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a post-credit scene in this movie, but it's not anything vital to the movie. If you enjoyed Miles Canton's performances, then stay for the post-credit scene, because he basically performs an entire song in the church that his father is a pastor of. He just performs an entire song, and it's really great. It's not nearly as great as the song that he sang at the Juke Club, but it's pretty fucking great. And that's it, folks. That is 2 hours and 20 minutes of Sinners. Again, I cannot give this movie justice with my words. This movie is absolutely stellar. There is nothing that I can nitpick about this movie. Like, listen, I love From Dusk Till Dawn and 30 Days of Night. I love those movies. And there's a place for those movies. There absolutely is. But there's also a place for this kind of movie. The emotional, cerebral, you know, like Mike said earlier, you don't want to see anybody die here. We like everybody here. You know, you don't want to see anybody turn into a vampire. But even once they're turned, they seem to be happy about it. Because like I said, fellowship. They're all equals now because they're all vampires. So this was very definitely an unusual vampire movie. Like I said, not marauding monsters, not crazy bloodsuckers obsessed with drinking blood like mad. In fact, the only time they drink is when they turn somebody. Like they're not egregiously just attacking people for food specifically. And like I said, just all those elements combined make this, in my personal opinion, an absolute 10 out of 10. No notes needed. I'm done.
All right. Cool. Yeah, you mentioned how like when they turn they seem happy too, and I'd have to watch it a second time to like really hone in on that, but maybe they're doing some like commentary or allegory on like assimilation too.
Yeah, gentrification, absolutely. I mean, because it's true.
Yeah.
When you watch the movie a second time, you notice that when everybody wakes up after being bit, they all smile. Every single one of them. Cornbread, the guy that Cornbread attacked, Mary, literally everybody smiles after they wake up as a vampire.
And when they have basically a big group out there turned, and the Irish guys start doing like their Irish dance, it's like everyone that's turned like automatically assimilates right into like, oh, this new, we're supposed to be the blues folks, right? But now that we've woken up as vampires, it's like, oh no, come join us. And so there could be like some commentary there. I actually haven't like dug deep into like all the means and themes yet, just because it's been a busy few days since I've seen the movie, but like it's really something I would like to like really take a deep dive into with like the script and all the hidden meanings and subtext and all that stuff. But even without like the deep dive, it's just a great movie on the surface.
Yeah. If you just watch it as a vampire movie, just a basic vampire movie, it's still fucking great. You might find the first half of the movie a little dull. Mike and I have both already said, in our opinion, there's not a dull moment here. I mean, every fucking scene, there's like a guilty pleasure to it. When he shoots the guy in the ass for trying to rob his truck. How fucking funny was that? I was all right till you shot me in the ass. That was fucking great. Just every little scene that felt like it wasn't ultra vital was still just so beautifully done and poignant. Even the scene of Annie cooking the catfish and the Chinese guy trying a piece of it. It's like we see this camaraderie, all these different colors. You know, we've got Chinese, white, black, all coming together to open this juke joint. You know, there's a lot to be said about what's going on in this movie. And I assure you folks, I could talk for another hour or two about this film, but obviously it is getting late. We're already past the 2-hour mark, so I think we've kind of beaten this horse as much as we can. Hopefully the dead horse doesn't get up as a vampire, but we have definitely beaten him to death.
Yeah, I mean, just to add really quick, because I'm about to spend two, I think I would disagree with anyone who calls like the first hour and a half dull, because to me it's all very interesting and engaging community building. You can make the argument that like if your movie is more type of like the 90-minute vampires show up and kill people for like 75% of the movie, then sure, yeah, this type of movie might not be as much your thing. But that doesn't make the first 90 minutes of this dull. It's just maybe not your style. But like I was never bored, or like I was never like, oh, they need to move this along to get to like something else. Like I was engaged with everything that was going on.
Exactly. These characters are all so compelling, whether you like them or you don't like them, they're all organic. They're compelling. You don't really want to see anybody die, other than Hogwood, obviously. And we obviously get that in a spectacularly petty, second ending, which I fucking love. But yeah, this movie is just such a masterclass. Ryan, I am so happy that Ryan Coogler, I didn't think he would ever do horror because, he's done superhero movies. He's done a couple of Creed movies now. I never thought he would enter the genre, and now that he has, I want him to stay. This is one of the most refreshing vampire movies I've seen in a very, very long time. And I don't necessarily want to see a sequel to this, not at all. But I definitely want to see Ryan Coogler stay in the genre and continue doing original IPs. Don't do what Robert Eggers is doing right now, which, mind you, is still masterful. But I would still rather see original stories from Robert Eggers than, more remakes. Now we're getting a Wolfman movie from him. So, but yeah, Ryan, man, stick in the genre. Maybe pick another antagonist. Do like a zombie movie, do a werewolf movie, do a something movie, but make it an original IP like Sinners, because I think this is your strength.
You know what I'd like to see is like someone pull like a modern version of like a pre-Romero voodoo zombie movie, because we really haven't gotten like a lot of that lately. Like Serpent and the Rainbow, I mean, that comes to mind, like, because that came out way after the era of voodoo zombies. But
wasn't there? What was the was it Australian movie from like the early 80s? Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka was the villain.
Oh,
do you remember that? Oh, Dead or Alive. Was that it? Dead or Alive or something like that? I
know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That was a voodoo zombie movie from the early 80s. I mean, granted, I still agree with Mike. There aren't enough, because the voodoo zombies can be a very compelling antagonist, especially because it gives us a human antagonist to hate, the person who's actually making these people voodoo zombies. So, yeah, Mike is absolutely correct. I would love to see a really good modern voodoo zombie movie. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, that will finally wrap up this episode, but let's take a couple seconds here just to see if there's anything else out lately by anyone. Venom, right back to you if you got anything.
Nothing that I haven't already discussed. Episode 36 of Creature Comforts is still the latest episode, where we talked about The Fly. We already have our plans for our next episode, where we're going to be looking at our first anime film ever, but I'll keep the title under my hat for now. And honestly, that's it. We haven't done a creature. We didn't do a Crystal Lake gift shop in April, so nothing to talk about there. I'm not going to have any guest spots probably until the summer with the Joe Blow horror show. So yeah, I don't really have a lot to speak of, honestly. The main show got postponed again. Creature Comforts got postponed this weekend. So yeah, not a whole lot to report, sadly. Oh, but it was my birthday this week, so at least I had plenty to do.
Nice. What about you, Dawn?
Yeah, I've got even less. Just with Creature Comforts canceled, I've got nothing.
All right. I got a guest spot scheduled, but actually for this coming up week, but I don't want to jinx it because it's so close. But by the next episode of Fresh Cuts, it should have happened, so I'll definitely announce it then. And then the only other thing I got is we have had the latest episode of the main show recorded, not the one Venom's referring to, but the episode prior. I've kind of been busy the past couple of weeks preparing for the vacation and going on the vacation. Now that I'm back, I should have that out and ready. That would be episode 66. So by the end of this week/weekend, that should be out and available. And then for the next episode of Fresh Cuts, I don't know everything that's releasing. I know Cronenberg's latest one, The Shrouds, is opening at the Indie Theater here this weekend. But I'm not sure if there's any multiplex horror movies coming
there
out,
is.
Though.
I forget which one.
When's Until Dawn?
Until Dawn.
Yep. Until Dawn's this Friday.
Okay. All right.
That's what I was saying. I thought it was this week or next week. Okay.
Yep.
Until Dawn, based on the video game Until Dawn of the same name.
Wendigo action.
Yeah. I'll definitely probably be making an effort to see both, because I'm actually
and I still
curious.
got to check out Ugly Stepsister. It is actually playing out here. I just didn't get a chance to see it this weekend because of all my birthday stuff. So I'll check it out this week.
Yeah, I just got lucky that I was able to see Sinners in the vacation city I was in. So then, like, I snuck in Ugly Stepsister last night because I don't know about you, Venom, but for me, it's only like not. There's like 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. showings, and that's it. So like,
Yeah, same here. Yeah, only
Yeah.
evening showings.
and like I referenced at the beginning of the show, I really liked that one. I was initially kind of leaning on the skip because I heard Cinderella in the synopsis, and I was like, oh man, is this going to be another one of those like, oh, we found a public
Cinderella's
domain
revenge.
half-ass? Yeah, but
Or
it's actually
Cinderella's curse.
it's a
Yeah, I forget.
Norwegian movie that's like a dark fairy tale take on the Cinderella story. So
Love it.
I was quite impressed.
Nice.
It just happened to come out on the same weekend as like this, so that's the only knock against it, I guess. But I really did like that too. But we'll save that discussion probably for the main show when we do our what we've been watching stuff. But anyways, so yeah, we got a couple movies to choose from, and we'll figure that out by the weekend probably. So with that said, thanks everybody for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. If this episode didn't sell you on seeing The Sinners in the theater, it just must not be for you.
Guys, yeah, I can't stress enough, whether you watch it in IMAX or Dolby. I mean, if you prefer the big video presentation, go to IMAX. But if you're like me, who loves music and loves just loud and beautiful, dynamic range in the theater, then go check it out in Dolby. Obviously, it's a smaller screen, but the sound is bigger, and I was really impressed with it. And as great as it looks in IMAX, I had a blast with it in the Dolby theater. So, whatever works for you, take your pick, go check it out. It's even playing in 4DX in some cities.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, so check that out if you can.
All right. Well, with that said, thanks everyone for listening. We will catch you next time. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
Pick that rabbit clean. Pick that rabbit clean. Hey, everybody, we're gonna pick that rabbit clean. Take care, folks.
Peace.